For those who have difficulty viewing a screen, perhaps maybe hearing audio, there are a number of accessibility options built into Windows to help those with disabilities to use their computers more efficiently. We're going to take a look at them now, beginning here in the Windows 8 environment on our Start screen. Let's just move our mouse pointer to the bottom right or top right corner of the screen till you see the charms, and we'll go to Settings. Now here under Settings, we'll click at the very bottom, Change PC Settings, and here's where we're going to find some of the Ease of Access PC settings. So with that selected over here on the right, you'll see at the very top our first option, which is something called High Contrast. The default view, as you can see, is a very bright background, and then everything in the foreground is darker. We can change that to High Contrast by clicking the slider. Now it does take a moment, and you'll notice the background now becomes dark, and everything is bright in the foreground, a little bit easier to read. Now that's one option. You can see there's also something here, make everything on your screen bigger. Now this is actually something that is not supported by my particular display. You may be able to change that. I'm going to go back here to my High Contrast, which now appears as on, click the slider to turn it back off. A little further down, you'll see something called a Windows shortcut for turning on an accessibility option of your choosing. Windows plus the volume up key will turn on, as you can see from the drop-down, the default is the narrator. And that is a voice that is actually going to read what's on screen for people who can't read the screen themselves. But there are other options as well. Maybe you don't want anything to happen when you use that shortcut. Or maybe you'd rather have the magnifier than the narrator, which allows you to look at portions of your screen or the whole screen much larger. There's also something called an on-screen keyboard, which we can access. We're going to look at these momentarily individually, but it just allows you to use a mouse to type in things on an on-screen keyboard as opposed to using a real keyboard and your fingers. So we'll leave it at narrator. And down below as well, notifications are going to pop up and they're going to stay there for 5 seconds. That's a default. If that's not enough time for some people to find it on the screen and read it, you can click the drop down and bump that up a couple seconds, or go to 15 seconds, 30 seconds, all the way up to 5 minutes. I'm going to leave mine at 5. And the other thing is the cursor thickness. So when you go into a program, let's say Microsoft Word, for example, and you're ready to start typing, where is the cursor? It can be difficult to find for people with viewing disabilities. So the cursor itself, which appears here on the left, can be thickened. We'll click the drop down where the default is 1. Let's jump up to halfway here. We'll click 5. Notice how much thicker the cursor is. Click the drop down again, and you can see we can go all the way down here to 20. Click that, and that's a very thick cursor. I'm going to change mine back now to 1. So you may need to scroll up to see the 1. Give it a click. And those are some of the ease of access settings available to us here in the Windows 8 environment. But there is something else called the Ease of Access Center, which we can access in the old desktop environment. So let's press the Windows key and go back to that technique we just used to get to our ease of access options. We're going to go to the charms. This time, though, when we move to the bottom right or top right corner and the charms appear, let's go up to Search. We'll click that, and we're going to type in Ease of, and start to type in Access. There are no apps, as you can see, but there are a number of settings if we go to Settings. There's Ease of Access right there. That's where we just came from. So that's one way to get there if we need to go back. But there's also something called Ease of Access Center. Let's give that a click. You'll notice we're taken to our old desktop environment, and you may have heard a voice in the background. And that's because of an option that's typically turned on, and that is to scan the section, and you will also hear that section read aloud. So all I'm going to do is turn these off so you can hear what I'm saying. But the section down below, which is to start Magnifier, start the narrator, set up high contrast and your on-screen keyboard, as you can see from here, with these checked off, they'll be read aloud. It'll scan through them individually, and a user can hit the space bar to select whatever's highlighted. So a nice little feature for people who have difficulty reading the screen. But we can access these individually as well, just by selecting them. So if we want to start the magnifier, for example, we could click it here. And you can see the default view for me happens to be set to 200%. We can click this little magnifying glass to go in and change that. I like 200%, but the view, as you can see, it's zooming in my entire screen. I have to use my mouse to move to the left, down to the bottom, to be able to see all of the screen. But if I want, I can go back to this magnifying glass and change the view to something else, like a lens. With the lens, now all I have is a little square that I can move around. So if I have difficulty reading what's going on at the bottom of this window, I just move that down. You can see it's kind of like holding a magnifying glass over the area I want to be able to read. All right, we'll go back to the magnifying glass to click there to get back to those settings. The other option is something called docked. And when we click that, we'll have a docked area. Typically, it's at the top of your screen. So as you move your mouse around below, you can see what's happening. I'm going to move over here to exercise files. I can see that at the top. So it's a little bit easier to read at the top. And this docked area can be moved. So we could move it over to the left. Let's go all the way to the left, and you can see how it snaps into position there. And if we wanted to, we could go to the other side, the bottom, the top, or just simply drag it out from the border to make it a little larger. I'm going to move mine back to the top, and when it snaps into position at the very top of my screen, I can let go, and I'm back at the default. Okay, let's go back to the Start Magnifier here. It brings up that little option where we can change our view back to full screen, but first, I'm going to bump this down to 100%, change my view back to full screen, and close it up. Okay, that's the magnifier. There are other options like the narrator, which will read the screen. Clicking that starts our narrator.
Narrator settings window. Focus on press any key on the keyboard to hear the name of that key. Press caps lock plus F1 to review the full set of narrator commands. Press the tab key to navigate through the options. Press caps lock plus exit narrator dialog. Exiting narrator.
So there we go. That's just a quick look at it. There are a number of different options. It's difficult for me to talk over the narrator, who is going to read the screen and all of the options and give instructions how to make those various selections. So again, for someone who can't read the screen, this is an excellent option, and they just have to follow instructions listening to a voice. There's also that on-screen keyboard that we're going to take a look at by clicking it. Now I can move my keyboard wherever I want it to go and start typing. So for example, if I was in Microsoft Word, I could use this instead of a keyboard. If I had difficulty managing the individual keys with my fingers, I could use the mouse to come in here and start typing. So let's close that up. And there's our Set Up High Contrast option again, which we saw earlier in the Windows 8 environment. All right, so I'm going to turn these two back on.
Access Center. Always scan this section.
I hear the narrator. I'm going to close up this window and return to my start screen by hitting the Windows key on the keyboard. And that's a quick look at some of the ease of access options you have available to you here in Windows 8.